In Mexico, Hurricane Norma lashes the country's northwestern coast.
Mexico's weather agency warns against apparent flash and urban flooding. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alagao-Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Philippines and Saudi Arabia seek enhanced cooperation on trade and renewable energy. Philippines files a diplomatic protest against China over the West Philippine Sea collision. Seoul hosts inaugural trilateral aerial drills with Washington and Tokyo. The United States warns Iran against any escalation of violence in the Middle East. And India launches a first in a series of test flights ahead of its Gagayaan project in 2025. The Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, has green-lighted the 6 billion pesos budget for the government's food stamp program in July 2024. Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, confirmed this after the agency's undersecretary met with the DBM. Punay said the budget department is committed to providing for the financial budgetary requirements of the food stamp program. The Walang Gutom 2027 food stamp program aims to help 1 million Filipino families who belong to the lowest income bracket. The Social Welfare Department is set to distribute food credits to beneficiaries under the said program.
Unexpected price hike on oil products looms tomorrow. According to oil firms' advisories, motorists will have to pay 1 peso and 30 centavos more on diesel per liter and 95 centavos more on gasoline per liter. Meanwhile, kerosene per liter will go up by 1 peso and 25 centavos. This marks the first price hike on diesel and kerosene and the second on gasoline this month. The adjustments will take effect 6 in the morning.
The Supreme Court has directed judiciary officials and personnel to bolster cybersecurity measures in response to the recent data breach at PhilHealth, which affected 13 million members. The new guidelines cover email safety, password security, data backup, and more. Additionally, officials and staff are required to secure all court devices, including laptops, desktops, and smartphones. The Supreme Court advises against downloading files and software from suspicious emails, links, and addresses. They emphasize the importance of sourcing downloads from reputable platforms and using judiciary-approved file sharing services for work-related tasks.
The Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, or PDEA, has reported a 52% reduction in casualties related to anti-illegal drug operations spanning from July 2022 to September 2023. PDEA Director General Mora Virgilio Lazo emphasizes that the agency's approach aligns with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s emphasis on community rehabilitation. However, the amount of confiscated drugs has seen a significant increase, surging from 2,349 kilograms in the period of 2020 to 2021 to 3,795 kilograms in the period of 2022 to 2023. Additionally, the number of drug suspects arrested experienced a slight uptick, moving from 64,862 to 64,143. Nonetheless, the government's drug enforcement units remain committed to vigorously pursuing major drug syndicates with the aim of curbing the supply of illegal drugs within the country and safeguarding the youth from the perils of addiction.
The Philippine delegation is expected to bring stronger partnerships with the United Kingdom. Madeline Villar Moratillo reports.
A meeting between Philippine senators and the parliament leaders of the United Kingdom is expected to bring investors to the country. Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri said invitation from the British group Inter-Parliamentary Union resulted in talks in many areas. This includes defense partnerships, modernization efforts for the armed forces of the Philippines, as well as trade agreements. Among the delegates were Senators Quispo and Bongo. The senators met with the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and the Lord Speaker of the House of Lords, Lord John McFall. Meanwhile, Zubiri added that the issue of better benefits for Filipino healthcare workers in the UK is also raised. Madeline Villar Moratillo reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Foreign Affairs appealed to overseas Filipino workers or OFWs in Lebanon to seriously consider the voluntary repatriation program of the government. This amid escalating armed conflict between Israel and Hamas spilled over into neighboring countries. Over the weekend, DFA has raised alert level 3 in Lebanon, indicating voluntary repatriation. Casualties were reported along the Israel-Lebanon border as the Israeli Defense Forces volleyed fire at Hezbollah. The Philippine Embassy in Lebanon has already urged Filipinos in the southern region to evacuate. Government data shows about 17,500 Filipinos are residing in Lebanon.
The Philippines and Kuwait have started negotiations to restore bilateral relations after the meeting between President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Kuwaiti Crown Prince Sheikh Mashal. The Department of Foreign Affairs reveals that the Kuwaiti Crown Prince requested an immediate meeting with President Marcos following the ASEAN-GCC summit. During this meeting, Crown Prince Mashal expressed Kuwait's earnest desire to normalize relations with the Philippines. He offered apologies for the previous breakdown in relations, attributing it to the narrow-mindedness of some Kuwaiti officials. The initial meeting between the foreign ministers of both countries will prioritize the welfare and rights of Filipinos overseas or Filipino overseas workers and subsequently work on resolving any outstanding issues between the two countries.
The Philippines and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have announced their commitment to strengthen cooperation in the areas of trade and investments, labor, and renewable energy. This commitment follows a meeting between President Marcos and Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, held on the sidelines of the inaugural ASEAN-GCC summit in Riyadh on the 20th of October. During the meeting, the Crown Prince expressed a keen interest in enhancing trade and investment ties with the Philippines, particularly through business-to-business engagements and the Maharlika Investment Fund. He also discussed potential partnerships in the field of renewable energy, highlighting a Saudi company specializing in solar panel production for the Middle East, which may consider investing in the Philippines. In response, President Marcos affirmed the Philippines' readiness to collaborate with Saudi Arabia in ensuring food security for the kingdom through specialized agricultural projects. Furthermore, he expressed a strong interest in engaging with Saudi businesses to gain insights into the structure of the Middle Eastern country's sovereign wealth funds. Canada and the United States have strongly denounced the recent perilous actions undertaken by the Chinese Coast Guard in the West Philippine Sea. Video footage reveals a Chinese vessel dangerously close to colliding with the Philippine boat Unaiza May 2, attempting to obstruct its resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre. Subsequently, another Chinese militia vessel reportedly made contact with the same Philippine boat. In response to this alarming harassment, both the U.S. and Canadian embassies have conveyed their unwavering support for the Philippines. The European Union has also voiced deep concern over the recurring incidents in the region. They have expressed their solidarity with the Philippines and have called for the strict adherence of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
The Philippine Coast Guard or PCG has reported the death of 2 crewmen in the aftermath of the fire that sparked on the motor tanker Seahorse in Batangas waters. Along with the Bureau of Fire Protection, the 2 agencies conducted a fire combat operation on board the vessel. A Coast Guard personnel received a phone call from the vessel traffic management system informing them that a blaze had erupted or had erupted at sea in waters around the Batangas Anchorage area. The motor tanker was carrying 41 containers with 20 liters of used oil. PCG added assessment and further investigation are being done in its substation in Batangas. Meanwhile, the Marine Environment Protection Group Batangas coordinated with Petron Company for a standby oil spill boom. This in preparation for a possible oil spill response. The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, summoned Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Xilian, after the latest collision incident involving China's Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia vessels near the Ayungin Shoal. But DFA spokesperson Maria Teresita Daza said Wang was apparently out of town and was instead represented by his deputy chief of mission. The Philippines, through the DFA, also filed another diplomatic protest against China following the dangerous maneuvers of the two Chinese ships against a Philippine Coast Guard vessel and armed forces of the Philippines contracted supply vessel for resupply mission to the anchored BRP Sierra Madre.
So for this particular incident, the department decided to pursue the usual diplomatic route, and that is to summon the Chinese ambassador and to issue a protest.
The DFA records show under the Marcos administration, the Philippines filed a total of 122 diplomatic protests against China.
As we did in the past, we intend to clearly convey our position that we have every right under UNCLOS to carry out our legitimate activities in our maritime zones, and that we do not accept any form of interference.
Daza also asserted that the Ayungin Shoal is part of the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. She pointed out China has no sovereign rights to interfere with any legitimate activities of the Philippines in the Ayungin Shoal. Daza said the filing of a possible second case on the West Philippine Sea against China is still under study. The DFA official also urged that China is creating tensions over the disputed territory.
All incidents like this will actually bolster the case that it's not the Philippines that's the aggressor, but the other party, which is China, that's actually undertaking dangerous maneuvers and blockades and putting at risk not only vessels, but more importantly, the people who are manning the vessels.
Meanwhile, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. immediately called for a command conference in Malacanang to discuss China's latest violation in the Ayungin Shoal. Marcos instructed the Philippine Coast Guard to conduct an investigation regarding the harassment acts made by the vessels of China. The Presidential Communications Officer, PCO, also slammed the illegal and reckless maneuvers by vessels of the Chinese Coast Guard, saying they caused damage to a Philippine vessel within the exclusive economic zone of the country. The PCO said President Marcos is taking the matter seriously and at the highest level. The Philippine government also criticized China over its lies surrounding the latest collision on October 22.
The Philippine government views the latest aggression by China as a blatant violation of international law. China has no legal right or authority to conduct law enforcement operations in our territorial waters and in our exclusive economic zone. We are taking this incident seriously at the highest levels of government. The use by China of brute force behind disingenuous facades necessitates this course of action. We called for this press conference to give you a clear and factual narrative of what transpired. The Chinese government is deliberately obfuscating the truth.
Coming up, more aid trucks arrive to help Palestinians in Gaza. The U.S. warns against any escalation in the Middle East. And Argentinian Economy Minister Sergio Massa pulls off a surprise win. Stay tuned, Mata ng Agila International will return for more global news.
This portion.
Ang Best Public Affairs Program. And the star goes to Open for Business Net 25.
It is a signal to the world that we are open for business.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos. Every Sunday, 9 p.m.
Sa dami ng problema, parang ang hirap ng huminga, di ba? Minsan, pakiramdam mo, hopeless na. Kaya dapat ihayag ang saloobin, himayin ang hinaing, alamin ang pwedeng gawin. Mag-reality check tayo.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. South Korea hosted its inaugural trilateral aerial drills with the United States and Japan. The South Korean Air Force said it, Washington and Tokyo, held the drill as part of their efforts to enhance defense cooperation amid Pyongyang's growing nuclear threats. South Korean military said the latest exercise involved fighters from Seoul, the U.S. Air Force, and Japan's Air Self-Defense Force escorting a U.S. B-53 strategic bomber. The B-52 bomber made the rare landing in South Korea after staging a commemorative flight out of biennial defense trade show in Cheongnam. Meanwhile, South Korea's Air Force reaffirmed that the U.S. and its two Asian security allies will uphold strengthening their trilateral cooperation.
India and Zambia have reached an agreement to strengthen their defense ties and explore potential collaboration in the manufacturing of military equipment in the South African country. This development follows a meeting between the defense secretaries of both countries in New Delhi on the 20th of October. The officials highlighted the long-standing relationship between India and Zambia, expressing their intention to further enhance it through the signing of a memorandum of understanding. This memorandum will serve as a framework for cooperation in various defense-related areas.
Russia's defense ministry has thwarted multiple attempts by Ukrainian troops to cross the Dnipro River in the southern region of Kherson. They state that Ukraine's sabotage and reconnaissance teams were intercepted by Russian defense forces during their attempts to cross the river. Additionally, Moscow reports downing 3 Ukrainian missiles aimed at targets in Crimea. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledges the challenging situation on the eastern front lines, noting sustained pressure from Russian forces. He states that Ukrainian troops have reportedly repelled 20 such attacks. In another development, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is scheduled to visit the Iranian capital Tehran for talks with regional foreign ministers. The discussions are expected to cover various issues, including the Nagorno-Karabakh region.
Independent analysts believe there is growing evidence that Hamas likely used North Korean weapons in its surprise assault on Israel on October 7. Images and video evidence circulating online show Pyongyang made arms like F-7 rocket-propelled grenades and 122mm artillery shells. Israel's ambassador Akiva Tor to South Korea also asserts North Korean weapons are being used by Hamas to attack Israel. Tor says it could be that Pyongyang's weapons have been in Iran for quite a long time. The Israeli Defense Force, or IDF, is yet to make an official statement on the issue. But sources say the IDF seized a North Korean RPG-7 launcher. War experts describe this launcher as a shoulder-fired weapon that fighters can use against armored vehicles or even Israeli helicopters. North Korea strongly dismissed the claims that Hamas used its weapons, saying the groundless rumor was orchestrated and spread by the United States.
For the second day in a row, trucks carrying aid crossed the Rafah border passage on Sunday. The trucks entered from Egypt into the besieged and heavily bombarded Gaza Strip. Anna Kui has the details.
On Sunday, Gaza seized the passage of an additional 17 trucks. This, a day after 20 trucks carried medical aid, food, and water into the Palestinian enclave. The United Nations has estimated about 100 trucks per day are needed to meet the needs of the war-torn region. The head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees warns fuel supplies would run out in 3 days. To date, over 4,600 people have been killed under Israeli airstrikes. More than 1 million people have been displaced. Anna Kui from Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees says 29 of its staff had been killed in Gaza since the outbreak of war between Hamas militants and Israel. Mark Castillo reports.
UNRWA writes on X that the agency is in shock and mourning. It confirms that 29 of its staffers in Gaza have been killed since October 7. The agency says half of these colleagues were UNRWA teachers. The agency also says 12 displaced people have been killed and nearly 180 wounded at its schools. Some 38 UNRWA installations have been reported damaged. Thousands of Gazans have sought shelter at UNRWA facilities since Israel launched an aerial bombardment campaign. The campaign was in reprisal for Hamas attacks in Israel that killed 1,400 people. The Gaza Health Ministry says that more than 4,600 Palestinians have been killed in those airstrikes. Israel has cut off supplies of fuel, water, food, and electricity to the impoverished enclave. Mark Castillo from Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC spokesperson, is calling for respect for international humanitarian law as aid arrived in the Gaza Strip this weekend. Arlene Ocampo tells us more.
ICRC's Hashem Hannes says the agency welcomes all efforts that could bring the necessary humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. Hannes says ICRC is ready to intervene. He calls for respect for the application of the principles of international humanitarian law. An initial aid delivery of 20 trucks came Saturday after intense negotiations and pressure from the U.S. A second convoy of 17 trucks of aid entered Gaza from Egypt on Sunday. On the same day, scores of Palestinians were killed in central Gaza after Israel stepped up its strike on the war-torn enclave. With the violence raging unchecked, Iran says the region could spiral out of control. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issues a stark warning to Lebanon's Hezbollah, saying getting involved would be the mistake of its life. Arlene Ocampo from Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Israel's defense minister says that the war against Hamas could take months. He insists, however, it would be the last against the Gaza militant group. Macy Membreri reports.
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant steps up the war of words with Hamas as he speaks with forces gathered for an unexpected ground invasion of the Palestinian territory. This in response to the unprecedented Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th. Gallant warns the fighting will take several months and at the end, there will be no more Hamas. He says before Hamas makes contact with Israeli tanks and infantry, they will know the shells from the Israeli Air Force. He adds that Israel's fighter jets know how to make this precise, qualitative, and mortal. Gallant says this should be the last war in Gaza, for the simple reason that there will be no more Hamas. Israel, which has reportedly vowed to eradicate Hamas from Gaza, says its air raids target Hamas commanders and infrastructure. Macy Membre from Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Israel's military has issued an apology to Egypt for an accidental tank round that struck an Egyptian post near the Gaza Strip border. The Egyptian military reported minor injuries caused by fragments from the Israeli tank round impacting one of their watchtowers. Further information on the incident was not provided, but it has been confirmed that an investigation will be conducted. Egypt has assured that this incident will not disrupt the flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza. While 20 trucks carrying essential supplies have already entered the besieged city, the United Nations estimates that around 100 trucks per day are required to adequately address the needs of Palestinian civilians.
The United States warns Iran or its allies against any escalation in the wake of Israel's war with Hamas. This, according to two top U.S. officials, hours after the Pentagon moved to step up military readiness in the region. Percy Parlade has more details.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the possibility of Iranian proxies escalating attacks against U.S. personnel raises concerns. Blinken says the U.S. expects a likelihood of escalation. He says no one should take advantage of this moment to escalate. Blinken says the U.S. is taking every measure to make sure that it can defend the region and respond decisively if necessary. The U.S. has sent 2 carrier groups to the eastern Mediterranean. Blinken's words echoed and reinforced an earlier message from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Austin warned of a prospect of significant escalation of attacks on our troops in the region. The comments from the 2 most senior members of President Joe Biden's cabinet came hours after the Pentagon said it was upping readiness in the region in response to recent escalations by Iran and its proxy forces. Percival Parlade for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for a United Nations-led negotiation process to end the Israel-Hamas conflict during the Cairo Summit for Peace in Egypt on the 21st of October 2023.
Immediate cessation of hostility, the call for the release of hostages, the lifting of the siege of Gaza,
The South African president emphasizes that the international bloc has a responsibility to support peace and urges all parties involved to exercise restraint. He also advocates against supplying weapons to either Israel or Hamas, as prolonging the war affects innocent lives and may further exacerbate the conflict that has plagued the Middle East. President Ramaphosa stresses that a proper settlement by the international community is the key to achieving security for Israelis and the freedom that Palestinians deserve.
Poland's opposition parties won enough seats in the general election to take power from the ruling party PIS, which has ruled since 2015. The election saw PIS return as the largest party, but without the ability to form a winning coalition in the 460-member lower house of parliament, ending with a record voter turnout of 74.7%. The final count had PIS with 35.4%, followed by the centrist Civic Coalition at 30.7%. The center-right Third Way at 14.4%, the left with 8.6%, and the far-right Confederation with 7.2%. That means Law and Justice takes 194 seats in Parliament, Civic Coalition gets 157, Third Way 65, while the Left and Confederation get 26 and 18 respectively. Civic Coalition, led by former Prime Minister and European Council President Donald Tusk, the Third Way and the Left have pledged to form a coalition government to oust the ruling party from power in the near future.
Mamy to naprawdę. Stworzymy w ciągu najbliższego czasu nowy, dobry, demokratyczny rząd z naszymi partnerami. Polska wygrała, wyście wygrali, Polki i Polacy wygrali.
The opposition also boosted its control of the less powerful upper chamber Senate, winning 66 seats to 34 for Law and Justice. The next move belongs to President Andrzej Duda, who has to nominate a candidate for Prime Minister.
To jest jeden z najpiękniejszych dni polskiej demokracji. Nie mam żadnych wątpliwości, że ten dzień przejdzie do historii Polski jako dzień jasny, jako dzień, który otwiera nową epokę, odrodzenie naszej Rzeczpospolitej.
In Venezuela, Maria Corina Machado won Sunday's opposition primary to face President Nicolas Maduro in the 2024 election. According to the commission, Machado won 26% of the votes in the primary, with nearly 92% of ballots counted. Her closest rival, Carlos Prosperi, took 5%, with the other candidates garnering less than 1% of the vote. Machado's ability to run in the general election, however, remains uncertain, as she is still barred from public office over her support of the sanctions on Maduro's government. The opposition, which says the disqualifications are unlawful, has been reticent about what it would do if Machado wins the primary but is unable to compete in 2024. Machado has said she could pressure the electoral authorities to let her register, while others have argued a substitute will be necessary.
Up next, the Israel-Hamas war threatens the lives of hundreds of babies daily. The European Union hands out a posthumous award to Masa Amini. And Aboriginal Australian leaders and their vow of silence. Mata ng Agila International will be back after a short break.
Aaksyon sa lahat ng problema. Walang uurungang reklamo. Re-responde anumang sitwasyon. Kung kayo po ay may sumbong, mag-text lamang po sa 0915-415-1035. Mag-email din sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayo magpadala ng inyong mensahe sa ating pong Facebook page at Net25TV. Walang imposible at lahat may solusyon sa mga totoong certified e-responder.
Hurricane Norma slammed into Mexico's northwestern coast Saturday afternoon. It brought heavy rain along with a threat of flash floods. It was, however, downgraded to a tropical storm by evening. Jay Suarez has more.
The storm came ashore about 25 kilometers northwest of the resort city of Cabo San Lucas on the Baja California coast. It gradually weakened as it approached land. The National Hurricane Center reported that Norma was moving northeast at 9 kilometers per hour, packing winds of up to 110 kilometers per hour. Hurricane Norma was expected to bring rainfall of up to 45 centimeters, producing flash and urban flooding along with mudslides in the area of higher terrain. The weather agency says heavy rains and flash flooding are expected to continue through the weekend. It warns that for the next couple of days, life-threatening surf and rip current conditions would affect the coast of southwestern and west central Mexico in the Baja California Sur. Local authorities say about 60,000 international tourists are staying in the area. Jay Suarez from Agila International. Trusted Connected on Point.
UK's Environment Agency says new flood warnings are expected to last this week after Storm Babette submerged hundreds of properties in water. In England, police confirmed that more than 1,250 properties have been flooded. Nottinghamshire County Council urged its residents in 500 homes to evacuate. Authorities also confirmed that 7 people died when the storm battered the UK with heavy rain showers. Babette's high winds also forced a passenger plane to skid off a runway at Leeds Bradford Airport. A 200-year-old bridge on the Roddle estate in Angus was also washed away. The Met Office also issued further overnight warnings for ice, which will remain in force in Scotland and northern England until Monday.
Detrimental effects to Gaza's health facilities and their patients remain as Israel's fuel cuts put the lives of premature infants in peril. After more than 2 weeks since the war began, children who are born in the midst of chaos have clung to their lives in incubators, which are now at risk of shutting down if fuel cuts are not amended. The UN's Children's Agency warns about the increasing danger as power and electricity decrease to critical levels over the 7 specialist wards that threaten newborn infants in Gaza. Their health ministry reports that there are 130 premature babies that are in danger. This is due to the lack of fuel in their facilities that provide vital support during various instances, including when a baby's organs have not yet been developed. As the war intensifies, agonizing images and videos of severely injured children have been circulating social media, highlighting the traumatic toll given to the population that makes up half of the Palestinian territory. Although Israel claims that its strikes are aimed at Hamas, their offensive has now claimed over 4,385 lives, the majority of which are the lives of children. In other news, the European Parliament awards the EU's top human rights prize, the Sakharov Prize, to Mahsa Amini. Amini is the Iranian Kurdish woman whose killing in Iranian custody sparked the Women Life Freedom movement.
European Parliament President Roberta Metsola says the 16th of September 2022 is a date which we live in infamy. Metsola says the brutal murder of 22-year-old Zina Mahsa Amini marked a turning point. Today, Mahsa Amini has been awarded the EU's top human rights award, the Sakharov Prize.
I am very proud to announce that the 2023 Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought has been awarded to Jina Mahsa Amini and the Women, Life and Freedom movement in Iran.
Metsola says Amini's death triggered a women-led movement that is making history. The world, she says, has heard the chants of women, life, liberty. 3 words that have become a rallying cry for all those standing up for equality, for dignity, and for freedom in Iran.
To the brave and defiant women, men, and young people in Iran who, despite coming under increasing pressure, are leading the push for change. The European Parliament hears you, the world sees you, and we are with you. Zan Zendegi Azadi.
The president says the European Parliament is with those who fight for change. Arlene Ocampo from Atanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Meanwhile, Iran's judiciary announced jail sentences for 2 female journalists who were arrested after reporting on the death of Mahsa Amini. According to the judiciary's Mizan website, Elahe Mohammadi and Nilufar Hamedi were both found guilty of collaboration with Iran's archenemy, the United States. In its ruling, they sentenced Mohammadi to 6 years in jail and Hamedi 7 years. They were also each given 5 sentences for conspiring against state security and 1 for propaganda against the Islamic Republic. The pair has been held in Tehran's Evin prison since September 2022, where their trial started in May. In August, the judiciary said their trials were not only linked to Amini's death, but also to their alleged cooperation with the United States, according to California-based NGO United for Iran. Tehran and Washington severed diplomatic ties after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which toppled the U.S.-backed Shah. Over the weekend, more than 1,400 African migrants have reached Spain's Canary Islands, with one vessel bringing a single boat record of 321 people. According to authorities, a total of 1,457 migrants have reached the Spanish islands off the western African coast between Friday night and Sunday morning, adding to a recent spike in arrivals. An emergency services spokesman said all of the arrivals hailed from sub-Saharan Africa. On Saturday, a rescue services spokesperson said 321 people reached the island of El Hierro aboard one vessel. This surpasses the previous record for a single boat of 280 on October 3. Interior Minister Fernando Grande Marlaska said the spike in numbers resulted from political destabilization in the Sahel. The Canaries route has been favored in recent years, with controls having been tightened in the Mediterranean.
On Monday, Aboriginal Australian leaders ended their vow of silence to denounce millions of their compatriots for rejecting a landmark push for Indigenous rights. Some leaders ended that silence in a scathing open letter addressed to the government, criticizing the appalling and mean-spirited outlook of millions of Australians. The referendum was defeated in every state of the country, despite being backed by Australia's centre-left government. If passed, the reforms would have created a consultative body to help tackle the inequalities that plague Aboriginal communities. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese launched the referendum, hoping to unite the country and address historical injustices. While the majority of Aboriginal Australians supported the referendum, some opposed it as a token measure that would not drive meaningful change. Albanese has vowed that his government will continue working towards Indigenous recognition, although it is unclear what options remain.
In Thailand, retirement is not the beginning of the golden years. For many seniors, it is a life of extreme poverty in one of the world's fastest aging nations. Thomas I. Likeness has that story.
Almost 1 in 5 people in Thailand is over the age of 60, and at least a third of them live in poverty. Meet Noi. She's a 73-year-old widow. Her only income is a small government pension. Works out to about 82 cents a day. She can't afford to cook at home. When she can, Noi lines up in the hot Bangkok sun for a free meal at this community pantry. Noi says when it rains, she stays home. And dinner, well, it's a few slices of bread with ketchup, because that's all she can afford. For retired teacher AU, life is even harder. After 30 years in the classroom, her meager pension can't even provide the basics. The 70-year-old never married, and AU is now homeless. Lost her home in the pandemic. She sleeps on the benches at a Bangkok train station, makes plastic flowers to sell on the streets. She says she wants a job, but there are none. These are just 2 of Thailand's seniors struggling in poverty. There are about 4 million more facing a similar life of hardship. The government has few solutions, says it can't afford to raise pensions, but it is considering raising the retirement age beyond the present 55 to 60 years old. But for Noi and AU and millions like them, today there is no help. Thomas I. Likeness for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The United States government issued its first ever fine to a private company that left space junk in Earth's orbit. Space junk or space debris is made up of bits of technology that orbit around Earth's environment but are no longer in use and risk collisions. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission fined $150,000 to Dish Network for not safely deorbiting its EchoStar 7 satellite. The FCC said that Dish's satellite posed a potential risk to other satellites orbiting the Earth's environment at its current altitude. Dish admitted liability over its EchoStar 7 satellite and agreed to a compliance plan with the FCC. Coming right up, China conducts an inspection of its Taiwan Foxconn sites. India prepares for its next space mission. And a Nigerian film dominates Netflix's stream space. Catch more news in business, tech, sports, and entertainment when we return.
Ang mikroponong ito'y naglalahad ng saloobin, oras na para ipasa sa bagong Makata natin. Galing ay ipamalas, pangarap ilabas, itodo ang lakas, rap sa Pilipinas.
Nagbabalik ang Lutong Daza dito sa Net25. Ako si Sandy Daza.
At ako naman si Patwi Daza, and we are the Cooking Cousins. Asahan nyo ang mas nakakatakam na mga recipes, mas malakas na halakhakan.
At tawag ko rito put-put eh.
Put-put. At syempre mga celebrity guests na game na game.
Espresso mo yun eh. Oh, galing.
Kita-kits sa kusina. Lutong Daza, Saturdays, 11 a.m. sa Net25.
China is conducting tax audit inspections of Taiwan's Foxconn sites in Guangdong and Jiangsu provinces. Taiwan-based Foxconn is a key supplier of Apple's iPhones. Sources say Chinese tax authorities also carried out on-site investigations into Foxconn's land use in Hunan and Hubei provinces. But Chinese tax regulators did not specify what they are looking into or any offenses that Foxconn may have committed. Deputy Premier Cheng Wen-san has criticized Beijing's actions, saying China's aim is to distort Taiwan's democracy. Meanwhile, Foxconn released a statement that they will cooperate with China's tax audit investigations. Amazon is trialing humanoid robots in its United States warehouses in a move to free up its staff. This is part of its commitment to automate more operations. The tech giant claimed that its robotic systems help create hundreds of new jobs within its operations. The firm noted 700 categories of new job types. Amazon disclosed that it has more than 750,000 robots working collaboratively with its human staff. India's space agency has carried out the first in a series of test flights ahead of its 2025 space mission. Dubbed Gaganyaan, the spacecraft is expected to crew 3 astronauts into low Earth orbit. Under India's space program, the rocket aims to send the astronauts to an orbit of 400 kilometers and bring them back after 3 days. Should it become successful, India will be the 4th country to send a human into space after the Soviet Union, the United States, and China. Indian Space Research Organization ISRO, the rocket was launched from Sriharikota and was successful. The space agency noted that the test was conducted to demonstrate whether the crew could safely escape the rocket in case it malfunctioned. ISRO added that the successful launch will now pave the way for other unmanned missions, such as sending a robot into space by 2024.
Our next story is guaranteed to deliver a punch. A group of boxing enthusiasts in Corpus Christi, Texas are putting on their gloves to fight against Parkinson's disease. Net 25's Jane Kathleen Gregorio introduces us to this nonprofit health and wellness program that helps Parkinson's patients regain their strength and mobility.
Did you know that each year, nearly 90,000 people in the U.S. are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, also known as PD? According to the Parkinson's Foundation, almost 1 million people in the U.S. are currently living with the disease. This number is expected to rise to 1.2 million by 2030. PD is a movement disorder that affects mobility, causing tremors, slowness, trouble walking, trouble sleeping, depression, and speech problems. Thanks to Rocksteady Boxing, a nonprofit 501c3 program, Parkinson's patients no longer have to face their illness sitting down.
With Parkinson's, over time, they lose their dopamine. And this program, Rocksteady Boxing, has figured out that with every punch they throw, they create their own dopamine, which is what they're lacking. So every day, 4 days a week, they come in. We have a class of about 15 right now. They come in every day and they box. And when they leave, their dopamine levels are filled back up. Our oldest boxer is 92. She is in the ring every day, 4 days a week. Our next youngest is Yanni, and she's 82. And she usually blows my hand back with her right hooks. We celebrate birthdays, we celebrate life, and we fight back Parkinson's all day.
Benny Flores, co-owner of London Martial Arts and Fitness School, opened his doors to the Rocksteady program to help more people in his community.
Been coaching 23 years, 12 years I've owned a business, and about 6 years ago, Jim Hughes asked me, do you know what Rocksteady Boxing is? I don't know what it is, but I care, I love, and once he hooked me up with Andy, did they really explain to me what Parkinson's is? And I just said, you know what, this is what's being provided. God wants me to do this, let's go. It's an everyday workout, it's an everyday thing. We enjoy being around each other. We're hitting the bags every day. We're singing karaoke almost daily. We're yelling out loud all the time. And camaraderie is the most important thing, having camaraderie, having other people, and the other people that are also dealing with the same issues. And this is a fight that they've been in their entire life, or since they've been diagnosed anyway, and they need somebody in their corner. And that's what I want to do. I want to be in their corner. My coaches are all here. We all want to be in that corner. We just want to be a part of the fight. We want to be a good corner man. We want to be what God's purpose is for us, just tools,
Been coming for 7 years.
And what results have you seen since you've been coming here?
Oh, I have increased strength, and I have more mobility. I'm more active. And I walk a mile on the treadmill when I come every day before I start exercising. But if you have Parkinson's, you can get very isolated, staying at home with so many things you can't do, you get so tired. But when you get into boxing, it gives you strength and positioning and helping you to stay active. But really, this is like my family here. And it's just a good place to be.
Just the physical activity, the camaraderie, the faith, the friendships, the grace that I see on an everyday basis. It is every day you will see miracles happen here. The minute you're diagnosed, I want you here in the gym. I don't want you to go home and think about Parkinson's. I want you here in the gym fighting it back because it makes a difference.
In Corpus Christi, Texas, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
It was a hard-hitting weekend in the UFC as Khamzat Chimaev and Islam Makhachev punched their way to victory. Vin Pascua has the tell of the tape.
Islam Makhachev ended any doubt in his rivalry with featherweight champion Alex Volkanovski in the main event of UFC 294. This after Makhachev finished Volkanovski at 3 minutes 6 seconds of their first round with a kick to the head and some ground and pound in their bout for the lightweight title. Makhachev was in command throughout and did not need to use his vaunted wrestling skills to defeat the man who presented the biggest challenge of his career. This was their second time they had a match since February, as Charles do Bronx Oliveira dropped out and Volkanovski took the fight on 11 days' notice. Volkanovski praised Makhachev for a great setup on the knockout and hoped to be able to fight Ilya Topuria at featherweight in January. Meanwhile, Khamzat Chimaev remains undefeated after beating Kamaru Usman in the co-main event of UFC 294. He won a majority decision over Usman with scores of 29-27 twice and 28-28. Chimaev chipped away at Usman's record-holding takedown defense with impressive wrestling and back control. Chimaev was originally scheduled to fight Paulo Costa. However, Costa was yanked from the card after undergoing elbow surgery. With the loss, Usman now has a 20-4 win-loss record, while Chimaev improved to a perfect 13-0. Reporting for Sports, Vin Pascua for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The new action thriller film of justice in Nigeria, The Black Book, has reached the top record viewership on Netflix global charts. The Black Book peaked at number 3 in the second week of global streaming, in which it also ranked in the top 10 English language titles for 3 weeks. Netflix stated that this film garnered a total of 5.6 million views within 48 hours after its release date, and it was also featured among in the top 10 titles in 69 countries. This Nollywood blockbuster film has been financed with a budget of $1 million with the support of experts and founders of Nigeria's tech ecosystem. The Black Book producer Aditi Effiong has mentioned the success of the film that came from the wholehearted production of Black people, actors, and producers. Nigeria's film industry, or Nollywood, has been a global phenomenon since 1990. Through the thriller films like The Living in Bondage, which was released in 2022. This film starts with the abduction of family members as the head of the Nigerian Oil Regulatory Agency worked together with the corrupt top politicians and police officers. Meanwhile, the rights group stated that the problem of injustice is prevalent in Nigeria as they remember the deadly protests of young Nigerians in 2020. In the past 3 years, many victims of police abuse have still not received justice.
And to start a brand new week, we leave you a quote from American pop icon Britney Spears. With love, you should go ahead and take the risk of getting hurt because love is an amazing feeling.
Well, we don't want to talk about heartbreak here.
So true.
But I think that it doesn't just apply to romantic love. It can even be love for what you do, a passion, or even a goal you have. You might have some setbacks, some heartbreaks along the way, but having that passion for it is an incredible feeling.
And it's not just that. If you use or apply unconditional love, it makes all the difference. It can see past hurts or wrongs. When it's real love, you just know it.
There never has to be whys or explanations.
Exactly. You don't hold a record of wrong or hurts.
So let's just love for the rest of the week. That's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alagao-Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point. Thank you for choosing Mata ng Agila International as your trusted news source, keeping you connected to the world and on point with stories from around the globe. Follow, like, and subscribe to @Net25 TV.